Hi, I'm FIDE Master Levi Cherbulenko, and in this series I explore the typical mistakes of people rated anywhere between 1000 and 2000. This is a first reaction, no engine analysis of a chess.com game played between 1524 versus 1538. Let's start. Alright, so white plays d4, d5, black plays symmetrical, e3. This already I'm not so sure about. Black's the c1 bishop. It's better to first develop the bishop to f4, put it outside the chain, and then close the chain with e3, and then develop the second bishop, right? It's usually not good to play e3 before you activate your bishop, because yes, you activate the f1 bishop, but you neglect the c1 bishop. So this already I don't really like. It's objectively not really a mistake, because it's nothing crazy yet, but already not the best move. Okay, so black plays knight f6, knight f3, bishop g4. See, black does not make white's mistake. Black could have played e6, like mirror white, but then again black would have done the same. Black would have blocked his bishop. That's why black first plays bishop g4, or another move would have been, let's say, I don't know, bishop f5, for example, and then e6, right? Put the bishop outside the chain, and then close the chain with e6. Let's see, so bishop g4, bishop e2 is a little bit passive. E2 is quite a passive square. I think white could have played, I mean, a couple of moves. c4 would be one such move, right? Putting pressure on the d5 pawn, followed by knight c3, and potentially followed by queen b3, putting pressure on both d5 and the b7 pawn. That's one of the downsides of bishop f5 or bishop g4. Because although it looks more active, but on c8 it actually was defending the b7 pawn. So the biggest downside of bishop g4 is the weakness of a b7 pawn. And so white can play c4, knight c3, queen b3, and putting pressure on this pawn is not so easy to defend it. Because queen c8 looks kind of weird, plus the queen has to stay on d8 to guard d5. But if black plays b6, then that weakens the light squares on the queen side. And usually when black plays b6, the bishop should be on b7 to cover up those weak light squares. But in this case they play b6, so they'll have like a fianchettoed pawn structure, but no bishop on b7 to cover up those weakened light squares. Okay, so b6 we don't really want to play. So that'd be one way. Or white, if white doesn't want to go for c4, that's fine. White can just play like bishop d3. And if you ask about this spin, it's very simple. Let's say e6, white can just go like knight bd2, and problem solved, right? I mean, like just castle, maybe play b3, fianchetto of a bishop, then go c4 and queen c2. And that's how white solves the pin problem. Because if black ever takes, white will just take back with knight. So that's why whenever you can, put your bishop on more active diagonals, like on d3, where it attacks the king eventually, right? h7, and not e2. e2 is like the most passive. So bishop e2 already is inaccurate. Alright, knight c6, kind of weird. Again, usually the queen side knights we put behind pawns, not in front of pawns. The problem with knight c6 is that it does not put real pressure on the d4 pawn. It can never take the pawn. It's a knight versus pawn. So there's no real pressure. Versus if black plays first c5 and then knight c6, then it's pawn versus pawn, right? It's like of equal value. And then the knight actually puts real pressure. Not only that, but the same as white's queen b3, black can eventually play queen b6, put pressure both on d4 and on the b2 pawn. So that's the bonus of c5. So you should always first use your c pawn to challenge white's central d pawn, and then put the knight, the queen side knight, behind the c pawn. Alright, so knight c6 is inaccurate. Alright, white does of course the same mistake, right? I think white should have simply like castled. In the opening, your number one priority should be the king. First king safety, then everything else. So first castle, and then depending on the black situation, white can either go for c4, right, and then queen b3 and knight c3 and stuff. By the way, another downside of knight c6 is that then black cannot play c6, pawn to c6, guarding the d5 pawn. Or white can go for the other setup I showed you with knight bd2, b3, bishop b2, oops, and then pawn to c4, also possible. But yeah, I think it's better to first castle. You're gonna be flexible. True castle, you're gonna need for sure, right? But then whether to go for c4 straight up or b3, bishop b2, knight b2, and then c4, that will depend on your opponent's actions. So it's better to stay flexible. Make the move that you're gonna make for sure anyway, and then already you'll play depending on your opponent's setup, okay? But let's see, white played knight c3, again makes the same mistake as black. Pawn e6, alright, finally white castles, bishop b4, taking a knight, not a real attack, I mean, I can just take him and play c4 and undouble, and then I'll have a two bishops, and then I can play like bishop a3, put pressure on the long diagonal. So I'm not sure that black actually want to take this pawn, this knight. Bishop d2, yeah, I mean, it's okay. Wait, what? Yeah, bishop d2 is okay. I don't know if it's the best, but it's an okay move. Bishop c3, this is crazy. Why would black take the knight? Like, I at least understand if black like takes and then white has to double the pawns. Let's say white makes a weird move and like this I can understand, though still this is bad because again, like I said, white can just like undouble the pawns, play bishop a3, control the diagonal, play rook b1, pressure on b7, so still makes no sense. But like here, white can just take with a bishop, so white keeps his pawn structure intact, so I don't understand why didn't black just like castle. Black could have just simply castled, and after a move like a3, he could have like accepted, alright, I made a mistake, and just go back to like d6 or e7 and have an okay position, because again, white's main plan here should be c4, and his knight is on c3, so white cannot play c4. But yeah, so I don't understand why, like, or at the very least, wait for a3, let white waste a tempo, and then take on c3. Yes, we take on c3, but at least white has wasted a tempo. I see this mistake all the time. Like, people take the knight without at least obliging your opponent to waste a tempo. Like, what's the rush? What's the rush? I don't understand. So this definitely is a mistake. So now white has the power of two bishops. Knight e4 makes sense. Bishop e1, good move. Of course, we want to maintain our two bishops. Oh my god, bishop f3. This is crazy. So black basically gives up his two bishops. Again, bishops are stronger than knights in open positions. Bishops are like 3.5 points, knights are 3 points. So we should never in a more or less open position give up our bishop for a knight. Knights are only stronger in, let's say, fixed pawn structures that cannot be changed, or in closed positions, but not really in positions that are open or have a potential to be open. For example, here is, we can say maybe like semi-open, but it has a potential to be open. White can play like c4, open up the game. White can play like eventually maybe like f3 or e4, right? f3, e4. So there is a potential for a pawn break, right? So then the bishops are stronger because the bishops are long reach. But let's see. So bishop takes f3. Bishop takes f3. White already has a big advantage here. Knight g5 attacking the bishop, bishop e2 keeping the bishop, of course. Queen f6. I guess black won a castle queen side, right? Let's see. f4. Why give up the e4 square? I think f4 is a mistake, because now black can just play like knight e4, and then that knight is untouchable by a pawn at least. So I think f4 is a big mistake. I don't see what's the point of f4. I think, again, we have to open up the game, so I think c4 would have been the right move, putting pressure on the d5 pawn, preparing potentially queen b3, again putting even more pressure on the d5 pawn and on the b7 pawn, also eventually opening up the c file, like after cd, and also there's ideas like b4, b5, also interesting if black castles queenside, pawn storm, right? I mean, there is no point in playing f4, and the plus of having the pawn on f2 is that whenever black goes knight e4, we can just kick it out with f3. Even also, by the way, we could activate our bishop like this, right? Activate the dash for bishop. So f4 is, I think, a big strategical mistake. I think white should have played simply c4. But okay, let's see. f4, mistake, knight e4. Now black has a nice knight. Rook f3. What is this? Like, there is such a typical idea to attack on the queen side, on the king side, I'm sorry, but when black castles king side already, like here black can just like castle queen side. He hasn't committed yet. You know, plus now with a knight on e4, our bishop on d3 will be blocked. So, right, it don't really work. Like, this usually works if your bishop is not blocked and can actually attack h7, but here the bishop is blocked. So the rook alone is not enough. Plus black has not even castled yet. they can just castle queenside. So white plays on the completely wrong side of the board in this situation. Again, he should have played c4, followed by all those plans that I showed you. Let's see. Yeah, white gets it completely wrong. h5, okay. Rook h3, g6, makes sense. Bishop h4. Well, this move I like actually. White activates the bishop, puts pressure on the queen. Black has, as you can see, weak dark squares because all his pawns are light squares. So you usually don't want to put all your pawns of the same color because you weaken the opposite complex, right? Unless you have a bishop, let's say, that guards those weak dark squares. Here, black doesn't have a dark square bishop. So he put all his pawns over light squares, but he does not have a guardian over weakened dark squares. And so white exploits it. Plus also black cannot castle queenside now, because the bishop is guarding the d8 square. So bishop f4, h4 is a good move. Okay, queen g7, queen f1. This is kind of weird. What's the point of queen f1? Unless like white wanna bring it to b5, but takes time, and even white is not that dangerous. So I think that's too slow. Again, I think white should have played simply c4 and then like queen b3 or queen a4, maybe rook c1, maybe b4, b5, maybe take on d5, right? Either way, black's king on e8 is weak. To castle queenside they can't, you know. If they castle kingside, then this is kind of a weakness, right? This is weak, and so either way white has an advantage. So I think white should have played c4. But let's see, queen f1, yeah, kind of weird. f6, bishop e1. I guess he was afraid of g5. All right, I mean, it makes sense, because now already the bishop doesn't do anything on h4, because the pawn is guarded, so it makes sense to put it back to e1. Rook f8, so I guess black is going for like e5, yeah? Okay, bishop d3. Well, again, c4 would have been interesting, especially knowing that black wanna play e5. Why not preemptively put pressure on the d5 pawn? This is called prophylactic thinking, right? We know that black wanna play e5 because the idea is that takes and then rook put pressure on the queen. So then why not play preemptively c4 and prevent black from playing e5? Because now e5 doesn't work because cd attacking the knight and simply being up a pawn. So I think c4 would have made sense. If takes, I mean, we just take and open the game up. Like we said, the bishops are stronger in open positions. So if takes is also great for us. So I think c4 would be the most logical. Okay, bishop d3. Oh, g5. Yeah, g5 obviously shouldn't work because it loses the h5 pawn. But bishop e4 or rook h5 would have been fine as well. And after takes, just queen takes with a big advantage. And this knight is hanging by the way. So I don't see the problem with unless, let me see, unless there's queen g6. But even that, I mean, queen g6. Well, like one of the variations, I could just go here, g4, rook h4. Should be fine. This is one of the lines. Maybe I could just defend it somehow, like this, or this, or no. Actually, queen f3 doesn't work because of g4. But like I said, at the very least, we could just go like this, and or even rook g3. Yeah, because the knight's pinned, then if knight takes, then bishop g6 takes the queen with check. So even rook g3 is a move, and then like eventually followed by h3, or simply rook h4. At the very least, maybe I can even play like bishop e2, should also be fine. And after, let's say g4, rook h4, it's kind of similar actually. Yeah, but okay. White took the knight, takes. F5, huh? By the way, another move would have been f5 if not rook h5, f5 immediately, and if takes, queen takes. And now the difference is that there's this pawn on d5 that's quite weak. It's quite difficult to defend it, because if queen d7, then we can like just, for example, take and rook h5 with a huge advantage. So I think f5 would have been pretty interesting as well. Immediately. Yeah, it makes sense conceptually to get rid of this pawn which guards, the d5 pawn. But okay, let's see, takes, now f5. Again, I mean, this I think was a move, rook h5, here, let's say, we just go here, g4, either here or here, should be fine. Or can play like queen e2, g4, rook h4. Yeah, the only thing is like this rook is kind of weird. It's a bit trapped, but should be fine. But okay, f5 also makes sense. e5, huh? Okay, now e5 should be a mistake. Rook h5, not so sure about rook h5 here. Why not simply d5? d5 should be a huge advantage. Because now if let's say knight e7, we would just play queen b5 check, and suddenly queen f1 now is useful, attacking the queen, attacking the b7 pawn, king moves, we just take the pawn, game over, huge advantage. Also we have, by the way, this bishop b4 idea, pinning the knight to the rook, also huge. And also we have like this pawn storm, can play c4, c5, just push the pawns eventually, maybe bring the rook to d1, push d6, right? Black's king is in the center. Yeah, this should be a huge advantage for white. This pawn is also, by the way, quite weak. There's also ideas like, let's say, bishop b4, pinning the knight first, like even instead of queen b5, and then playing like queen c4, attacking this pawn, attacking the e4 pawn, also with huge advantage. So d5, and I guess black should play like knight d8 to guard this, but even then we can play like, there's many moves like bishop b4 maybe, attacking the rook, activating the bishop, followed by like rook d1, and then like d6, there's also queen b5 check all the time. We can also just take the pawn as well, why not? Simply being up a pawn. Can also just go immediately queen c4, attacking the e4 pawn. The knight on d8 is passive, the king is weak, the rooks are disconnected. Black has all these weak pawns. So Black has a huge advantage here. So I think d5 is basically winning. For white. But let's see, he played rook h5. Yeah, this I'm not so sure. This I think is a mistake. ed. Knight d4, yeah. Queen c4 makes sense, attacking the knight, attacking this potentially. Let's see, yeah, I guess if knight f5 and there is like queen e4, yeah. Triple attack on the king, the knight, and the b7 pawn. And if like knight here, we can like just take the pawn, or play here, or actually, now if you think about it, wait, rook h7, attacking the queen, the knight, but then maybe f5. Yeah, there's this f5 is... Oh, wait, f5, queen a4 check, right? Yeah, check and then take the queen. Yeah, this is maybe the best. Check and take the queen. Yeah, so knight f5 doesn't work. Okay, castle long, bishop a5. Looks kind of weird. Bishop a5, not so sure about it. Maybe should have played some other move, I don't know. Maybe like rook d1 or something. Because rook d1 we cannot take on f5, because then wait, rook d1 doesn't work. Rook d1, there is knight f3 check. A little tactic, right? Take some rook takes d1. No, that doesn't work. Well, then not rook d1, maybe some other move. I don't know, maybe bishop f2 or something, attacking the knight, the pawn potentially. Or maybe rook h3, right? Bringing the rook like to c3 or b3 or a3, depending on the situation, and attacking black's king. So something like this. But yeah, bishop a5, I'm not so sure about. E3 and white resign. I think it's a bit premature to resign. I don't know why he resigned here. The situation is still quite unclear, so I think it's too early to resign. Again, maybe you could have played like rook h3, let's say, right, attacking this pawn, and if the pawn ever moves, and white can like activate the rook. We have a third rank on like c3, b3, a3, attack the king. There's also like rook e1 maybe, putting pressure on the e3 pawn, also blockading the pawn, right? I think black will ultimately lose this pawn. Actually, there's all these tricks of like if knight f5, queen e6, or there's queen d7, that's a bit problematic, right? But still, like this pawn is quite isolated, so if white can win back this pawn, I think white should be fine. So I think it's way too early to resign, but yeah, here I'd say bishop a5 was weird. I think either rook h3, or I don't know, bishop f2, or some other move, or let's say pawn a4, or even pawn c3 even. Let's say pawn c3, attack the knight, knight f5, and then simply queen takes e4, winning this pawn. And if white wins this pawn, then white is in complete safety. I mean, white is quite safe. I don't see the point of resigning here. I think it's premature. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.